praying break for 10 minutes. So from 6:30 till 6:40, you will have 10 minutes break for praying. I'll ask you one question. Can you conduct a research if you don't have GCP or equivalent certificate? GCP means good clinical practice. The answer is no, since you will deal with participant information. The second question, how can you get this certificate? There is one option to take online course, or you attend the course, then you have to pass the test. And the other option is to deep dive with Dr. Mohammed Al-Tanir for 2 hours into good clinical practice. So if you attend more than 75% of the upcoming 2 hours, and we trust your honesty, even in a virtual way, the form will be sent to you later in your email. You have to fill it before specified time. At that time, if you are interested in GCP certificate, at that time you are eligible to take this certificate. So join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammed Al-Tanir. Welcome, Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed, you are muted. I couldn't hear you. There is no voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dunya, for this nice introduction. We will start with good clinical practice. As Dr. Dunya said, after these 2 presentations, you will be entitled for a certificate of GCP that is valid for 3 years anywhere in any health institution worldwide. So let's start our journey with GCP. So let's talk first, what's the difference between clinical research and medical practice? We will talk about similarities and differences between clinical research and medical practice. Medical practice, we treat a patient with proven marketed drugs or therapies. Treatment are usually based on individual needs. So each patient may receive different treatment according to certain conditions and factors. Individual patient data is not reported to a sponsor. It's just kept in the medical file of the patient. Documentation normally are available for the use of the treating physician, institution, and if applicable, insurance provider. While clinical research, we conduct research with drugs procedure to establish efficacy and safety. All subjects should and must follow the same treatment regimen as specified by the protocol. We have a greater quantity and quality of documentation that is required. Clinical research data collection and reporting of individual subject data is required in a consistent and specific format for all subjects as stated by the sponsor. It also requires concise documentation in order to provide complete and valid data for evaluation of the result. That's what we call in sponsored clinical research trial master file. Data are monitored by sponsor and inspected by health authorities in Saudi Arabia. It is inspected by the Saudi Food and Drug Authority. We all know that evolution of ethical codes started early in 1947, just after World War II, by establishing Nuremberg Code in Germany. Then in 1964, Declaration of Helsinki came on, and this Declaration of Helsinki guidelines are really updated every 4 years. In 1979, after Tuskegee issue, Belmont report came up from the United States of America. We have also what we call QIOMS and ICH GCP guidelines. So briefly, Nuremberg Code has 10 rules. It starts talking about voluntary consent, good science, scientific merit of the research, potential benefits justify the experiment, minimize the harm to participants, and degree of risk should be less than potential benefit, and subject can end their participation at any time. Declaration of Helsinki values really are based on scientific literature, on lab and animal experiments preceding human trials, study protocol, qualified persons to conduct the study, data protection, ethics committee approval, risk-benefit ratio, publication of accurate results, obtaining of informed consent, and risk-benefit and predictable hazards. The Belmont report really has three main pillars: respect for person, that is really justified by obtaining informed consent from each participant; beneficence, by assessment of potential risks and benefits, and justice by selection of people, equal selection of people to be in the research. So respect for persons, beneficence, and justice are really three important issues to always take care of and consider whenever we want to approve a proposal to be conducted. So what is clinical trial? Any research project that prospectively assign human subject to intervention or comparison group to study the cause and effect relationship between a medical or surgical intervention and health outcome. So whenever these conditions are fulfilled, we are talking about a clinical trial. What is ICH, International Conference on Harmonization of Technical Requirement for Registration of Pharmaceuticals for Human Use? First established in 1990, that set up with governments and pharmaceutical representatives from USA, the European Union, and Japan. What we care about in good clinical practice, the chapter E6 that was first issued in 1996 and it is updated on regular basis. So what is GCP and why it has been established? It's a standard for the design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis, and reporting of clinical trials that should provide credible and valid and accurate data. In addition, to maintain rights, integrity, and confidentiality of subjects involved in any clinical research or clinical trial. So because, as you know, the majority of investigational products that are not yet registered in the market, usually the studies are conducted worldwide. In order to standardize all these trials worldwide, they came up with this good clinical practice to really unify the standards and came up with better credible data and strict integrity and protection of subjects participating in this research. So the two main objectives of good clinical practice are protecting the subject or patient involved in the research and ensure accurate and credible data. What are the key documents for GCP? Protocol. What we mean by protocol is a proposal itself. We can call it protocol or proposal. Investigator brochure, informed consent. Investigator brochure includes everything that is related to the investigational drug done prior to the conduct of this research. I will give an example. If we are conducting a phase 3 clinical trial, this investigator brochure should include all publications and accurate data about phase 2 clinical trial, phase 1 clinical trial, experiments on animals and lab that precede phase 2 study. Informed consent should be obtained from each participant. Each informed consent, it's a process and not just a written document. The investigator should explain in details 13 main factors regarding the objective of the study, the risks of the study, to show to inform the participant about his rights once participating in the study, such as confidentiality of his data, his right to withdraw from the study at any time, what are the anticipated benefits, possible risk that might happen during the conduct in the study. So let's talk about good clinical practice principle. First one, all research or clinical trials should be in accordance with Declaration of Helsinki basics. 2, studies should be initiated and continued only if anticipated benefits outweigh risks. 3, rights, safety, and welfare of human subject take priority over interest of science and society. So first thing to keep in mind that no harm should be really done to all participants in the trial. 4, available non-clinical and clinical information on the investigational product should be adequate to support study. That's what we said it should be present in the investigator brochure. So GCP principles, studies initiated and continued only if anticipated benefits outweigh risks. And what do we mean by benefits? By beneficence that do no harm, good research design that will answer the research question, competent investigators based on experience, education, and training, favorable risk-benefit ratio by maximizing benefit and minimizing risks. What constitutes a risk in research? Only those risks that may result from the research should be considered when the IRB performs its risk-benefit analysis. So only the risk that is really resulted from the research protocol itself should be really evaluated and weighted by the IRB in order to really weigh benefits versus risk in order to grant approval. It is possible for the research risk to be minimal even when the therapeutic procedures present more than minimal risk. Let's take an example. Patients undergoing CABG surgery, it's a very serious, extensive surgery. So the clinical risk is high. But if the study is to assess post-operative pain and like comparing 2 different regimens in post-operative pain management, there is a minimal research risk in this scenario. So even though the patients are at high clinical risk, but the research risk is very minimal, and approval from IRB should be granted easily. Minimal risk, all research involves some degree of risk. When we talk about risk, we do not only consider physical risk. We have to take into consideration social risk, political risk, like economic risk, and even sometimes cultural and emotional risk. So, however, some research is considered to be of minimal risk. Minimal risk is defined in the common rule to be the probability and magnitude of harm or discomfort anticipated in the research are not greater in and of themselves than those ordinarily encountered in daily life or during the performance of routine clinical practice, physical or psychological examinations or tests. Well, let's take an example. If I want to involve diabetic patients who are presenting to the diabetes center in your hospital, and usually at each routine visit, you perform some clinical tests to really assess the control of diabetes with other tests that might involve electrolytes or other blood tests. So if your research that you invite the participant to will not exceed or will not demand additional tests or additional imaging or additional tests that they are not routinely requested by the physician in your routine visit. So this study is considered at minimal risk and should be easily granted. But if the study requested additional tests that will expose the patient to unneeded risk, this study is considered at higher risk than minimal risk and will require full review board of IRB to really assess and appraise the risks versus the benefit and give their final decision about approving or rejecting the proposal. What do we mean by benefit in research? Benefit refers to something of positive value related to health or welfare. So it falls into two major categories. Could be direct benefit to subjects, to participants in the study, or could be benefit to others. So it is clear how it could be benefit directly to you as a patient or participant by providing better treatment, better health care. If we are really investigating an investigational product that might enhance the overall health care of the participant. Benefit to others, as you know, the good percentage of clinical trials are conducted on cancer patients. And some studies really involve cancer in their terminal stage. So maybe patients, they have little chance to survive before really accepting the drug by FDA and be registered in the market. So it might that this terminal stage patient will not directly benefit from this trial, but in the future, other cancer patient at primitive stage of the cancer or middle stage of the cancer can benefit from the drug. So risk-benefit ratio is very important factor to consider. We have to really identify the risk, and we also have to really highlight the potential benefit that will be added to the subject to justify the risk that might be encountered during the conduct of research. The third principle of GCP is right, safety, and welfare of human subject. So why do we need IRB? That's why IRB is established. IRB refers to Institutional Review Board. Institutional means that each IRB at each hospital institution should really review the proposal and have its identity to provide or grant approval or not. In Saudi Arabia, it's not really, you cannot get one approval from one hospital and apply it to other hospital. Yes, I know it's a mess, but that's why we call it institutional. So that if you want to conduct study in Jamiat al-Imam in Dammam, you have to apply for the IRB approval in that university or the hospital that is connected with this university. If you need to do it multi-center in King Fahd Medical City in Riyadh or in another hospital in Jeddah, you have also to obtain the the approval of each institution. That's why we call it Institution Review Board. However, whenever it is you obtain the first approval when it's a multi-center study, you can submit the approval of the previous IRB with your application to the other institution IRB, and this could really give it a boost to be accepted quickly. So IRB, first responsibility of IRB to protect the human subject, but also to protect investigators and institution. How? Because when IRB is granted to the PI, it's usually given in the address to the PI of the study. Then it is the IRB responsibility behind weighing the risks and benefits. So that's why it is prohibited to conduct any research without IRB, because anything wrong that could happen to your patient, then you will be seriously sanctioned, and you will be like big time violating the rules of clinical research conduct. So IRB protect my patient by weighing risk and benefits before granting the approval, but also by well studying the proposal. And IRB board should have qualified people in research, usually in different disciplines of research, in order to well appraise and evaluate risks versus benefit. Non-compliance with IRB rules can hurt the reputation of both the investigator and the institution. The fourth principle of GCP is available non-clinical and clinical info, as we said in the investigator brochure. The investigator's brochure is usually provided by the sponsor. So this is, we are talking once the sponsor is like external sponsor or the protocol is written by a pharmaceutical company. So what about if the study is investigator-initiated trial? In this case, also the principal investigator should provide previous published literature about this topic regarding all clinical trials that precede the phase we are conducting on this investigator brochure product. So this is a table of content of investigator brochure. It should really contain a summary, introduction, physical, chemical, pharmaceutical properties and formulation of the drug, non-clinical studies on animals and lab studies, non-clinical pharmacology, pharmacokinetics and product metabolism in animals, and so on, effects in humans, safety and efficacy, marketing experience, and publication and reports. GCP principle number 5, studies should be scientifically sound, described in field detailed protocol. This is really very important. Sound science. If you submit a study to the IRB, even though the main responsibility for IRB is to protect the participant, but also the study should be scientifically sound and should be detailed in a clear way, with stressing on 2 main issues: the rationale behind conducting this study and the expected outcomes from this study. In addition, that it has to have really a clear biostatistical justification involving adequate sample size calculation. The protocol should really provide a very clear cutoff point between inclusion and exclusion criteria, correct data analysis plan, and appropriate interpretation of results based on valid valid statistical tests to really assess the significance level between study and comparison group. The protocol should be signed by the sponsor and the investigator, with like the research center representative in the institution to confirm their agreement that the trial will be conducting according to the protocol and good clinical practice. So this is usually the sponsor signatory approval page where the investigator should sign this approval agreement and date it. In addition to the institution itself represented by the research center or research unit in the hospital or university. So study should be, as we said, in compliance with IRB and the ethical committee. Some institutions, they call the IRB ethics committee. Both are okay. Medical care given to subject is the responsibility of qualified medical professionals. And as I said, investigators should be qualified by education, training, and experience. And they should really provide sufficient time for this study, because if not, they will reflect the bad reputation about the institution toward the sponsor, and the site won't be selected anymore to conduct any more international or national multi-center trials. So they should also take care of adverse event during and after the trial. We'll talk about this in the second hour of our GCP course, and should complete the study protocol. So the ninth principle is freely given informed consent that should be obtained from every subject prior to study participation. This is very important, freely given informed consent. The physician should really not put any influence on the patient to provide the informed consent. It should come freely from the participant. Informed consent, we should, in the informed consent, said that this trial involves research. Kalimat bahth, it's a must in the informed consent. And informed consent should be in the native language of the participant. In Saudi Arabia, the native language is Arabic. So the informed consent should be written in Arabic and should really include هدف التجربة, مراحل الدراسة, مسؤوليات المشارك, المخاطر والفوائد, الشخص, person to contact for further information if you have any question or anything happen or you need any clarification or justification about anything during the study. Also, the informed consent should include the trial treatment and the random assignment. It should state if there is any alternative treatment. This is very important, and sometimes it is missed in some informed consent. If there is an alternative treatment and the investigation product is not the only treatment for the disease, so this should be stated clearly that there are some other alternative treatment. Compensation, if available, or treatment available to the subject in the event of related injury. Also, we should state if any harm happened to the patient, what compensation, who will treat the patient. All these details should be written in the informed consent. And the word voluntary is a must. مشاركتك طوعية في هذا البحث. كلمة طوعية أو يجب أن تذكر في informed consent. The confidentiality of the subject and all related data also should be strictly presented in the informed consent. Expected duration and approximate number of subjects involved in the trial, and countries and institution, number of countries and institution participating in the trial is also recommended to be in the informed consent. So I believe you want me to stop. So we will take a break of 10 minutes and pray the Maghrib and come back again. Thank you, Dr. Dunya.
Thank you, Dr. Tanim. So you see you again after 10 minutes break of a praying break. Enjoy your break and see you again. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammed Tanir again. Yes, Dr. Mohammed Tanir, welcome. You can proceed.
Assalamu alaikum. So we continue. You can hear me?
Yes.
Good. So the 10th good clinical practice principle is that study information should be recorded, handled, and stored to allow accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification. So this is by doing a really well-secured archiving, and only the research team should have access to the data. So it should not be really available on a desktop without a securing, like a secured code, or none of like people other than research team should have access to this data. The archiving, the sponsor should obtain the investigator institution agreement to really keep and retain the trial-related essential documents until the sponsor inform the investigator institution that these documents are not needed. As per GCP guidelines, that essential documents are retained until at least 2 years after last approval of a marketing application, or at least 2 years have elapsed since the formal discontinuation of clinical development of the investigation product. Sometimes this duration goes up to keep all related document of a trial up to 5 years. And the sponsor should really provide a fee for archiving this trial for the institution. So this is won't be done for free. The site will keep this files regarding a fee paid by the sponsor. GCP Principle 11 is the confidentiality of subject records protected in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements. This is really also very important. As we said, that IRB decision matrix should really involve the 3 pillars that we talk about stated in Belmont report: beneficence, justice, and respect for person. Beneficence also always weigh risk versus benefit. The analysis should be really done appropriately. The experimental design should be really well established and written in order to be applied adequately. And the qualification of PI should really fulfill and be at the level of the experiment. Justice, that means subject selection. We cannot select people according to their level of education, nor according to their race, ethnicity, or religion. All people should have equal right to be selected in the study if there is no contradiction with the purpose of the study, and inclusion and exclusion criteria and recruitment process should be clear and like easily applicable. So practicability also is a part of the justice. Respect for persons, this, as we said, it's informed consent for adults. All adult participants should provide by their own a written informed consent. An assent should be provided and should be given by all patients participant aged from 12 to 18, and in addition to an informed consent signed by the legal partner. Legal, we mean a partner or like parent, father or mother. Privacy and confidentiality, protection of subjects also are major issues for respect for persons. Investigation product manufactured, handled, and stored in accordance with GCP and used in accordance with approved protocol. This is very important. the pharmacy of the hospital, and it's preferably if the institution is big enough and active in research to have like a research pharmacy, that they will heavily get involved in really distributing the investigation product, make sure that the drugs are stored according to the protocol regarding temperature, regarding quality of storage, regarding giving the records of how many trials are we still having in order not to really fall in shortage of the investigational drug that may really affect the good conduct of the trial. And also systems and procedures implemented to assure quality of study. So we have to have written standard operating procedure, clear SOPs, clear policies in the institution where the research is taking place in order to really provide the best quality of research conduct. So quality system, there should be a written description of all trial management system and conventions, and detailed written instructions to achieve uniformity of the performance of a specific function. A trial-specific operating procedure must be developed for each trial. So after all what we listed and state about GCP guidelines, we have to talk about roles and responsibility of people taking part in clinical research. So the primary responsible in clinical research, as you see here in the center, is the investigator. The investigator has to deal with all stakeholders, with the sponsor, with the regulatory authority represented by SFDA, with the institution review board, and with the subjects' participations or subject participating in the clinical research. So the investigator is really the cornerstone of a successful clinical trial. Second is the sponsor. Sponsor has really many responsibility in the success or in the conduct of clinical trial. Should provide a well-written clinical protocol, should provide the investigator brochure, should really make an agreement with the institution, should provide the investigational product in the best quality, and sometimes the monitor is different than the sponsor, and sometimes the sponsor itself conduct the monitoring issue. I believe you might heard about something called CRO, Clinical Research Organization. These are companies contracted by the sponsor to conduct monitoring on sponsored clinical research. Their main role is to make sure that all the data are really reliable, and they verify the data to the data sources like medical files and so on. So subject also, the relation between investigator and subject is by obtaining the informed consent, by explaining all items of the informed consent we talked about earlier. The investigator should really fulfill the auditing process executed by SFDA, and should answer all the question raised by IRB during the conduct of the study, should submit the progress report, the final report, any serious adverse event if happened during the conduct to the IRB, in order that IRB will take the right decision to achieve their main role by protecting all participants in the study. So IRB also get in touch with the SFDA whenever the SFDA has any question about the conduct of study. They contact the investigator and the institution review board that granted the approval in order to obtain a report about the safety of the patient or so on. The IRB and sponsor get in touch whenever there is serious adverse event, unexpected desirable outcome during the conduct of the study, because they both have to fulfill the requirement of SFDA. So this is very important to know, that a successful clinical trial and to be conducted according to GCP guidelines, all players have a role to really execute, mainly by the investigators, followed by the sponsor and monitor, IRB, SFDA, and patients. We will talk in details about the investigator responsibilities in the second presentation. So let's talk a bit about IRB responsibility. As I said, it's independent body, a committee constituted of members whose responsibility is to protect the rights, safety, privacy, and well-being of human subjects involved in research activities. Should consist of members who have the qualification and experience to review, evaluate the science, medical aspect, and ethics of the proposed trial. It's sure that their main role is ethical, to protect the rights of the patient and their safety, but also a major role also is to evaluate the scientific merit of the study. So members should be qualified, and in addition, we can have external members, one from the community, a scientist, external scientist, not belonging to the same institution, but to others, in order to also get their opinions about the safety of participants. Minimum number of IRB members should be 5. It can exceed up to 10, 12, 15, and IRB should work according to standard operating procedure, and could be audited by Bioethics National Committee on regular basis, in order to ensure that everything is in accordance with good clinical research conduct. What are the sponsor responsibility? It should sponsor should ensure the quality assurance and quality control, have appropriate trial management, financial agreement that should fulfill with the institution and the investigator, because also the institution will charge some overhead for all research conducted at their on their premises. Safety evaluation, monitoring, audit, and supply and handle investigational product. All these are responsibilities of the sponsor. In summary, why good clinical practice? For 2 reasons, as we stated in our introduction, in order that the data and reported result to be credible and accurate, and also to preserve the right, integrity, and confidentiality of trial subjects. So quality data plus ethics equal GCP. Ethics alone is just a part of GCP. Good, valid data without ethics do not really fulfill GCP. Both should be really associated in order to really give good clinical practice for clinical research on human subjects. So in summary, 5 things we have to keep in mind. As we said, appropriate ethics, sound science, qualified investigator, independent review, we mean here IRB, and quality systems. Once all these 5 principles are in place, we can ensure that good clinical practice principles are met. appropriate ethics, sound science, qualified investigators, independent review, and quality systems. You can delegate tasks as principal investigator, but you cannot delegate responsibilities. We all know that the principal investigator by himself is not really capable to conduct a clinical trial. He needs a team. He needs co-investigator that should really possess the same scientific or the same qualification as a PI regarding experience, education, and training to support him in the conduct of the study and to not interrupt the study while the principal investigator is on leave. And while all research team are on leave, so it's the responsibility of the PI delegated also to the co-investigators to really recruit patients for the study, to follow up with patients. A study coordinator also is a very important factor for the success of any trial, because a study coordinator can really facilitate data collection, contact the patients for follow-up, all issues related to administrative work could be really facilitated by a well-trained research coordinator. So this is a template of delegation of responsibility log. This should be, we should state here the study title, investigator, principal investigator name, and here are the name and titles of the research team, like co-investigator, the pharmacist, research pharmacist involved in the study, because as we said, has a main role in really to keep the investigational product in a safe place and to dispense it whenever we send an order to a research coordinator. And here we can really define the responsibility in the initiation visit prior to recruiting patients. So each member of the research team should be clearly define the responsibilities, and the time of involvement should be praised. Sometimes we found ourselves in front of involving new active members once we see that the co-investigators are not really active. So that's why we should also provide on this the delegation sheet the time that the responsibilities were from the start to the end, in order really to know who did what and when he did it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, be ready to answer before moving to the second presentation. Any question?
Thank you, Dr. Tanir. It seems that there is no any question in Q&A, so you can proceed for the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.